the person I'm doing a refutation speech on is Isaac. And the claim I'm responding to is that military-grade equipment is negatively changing how the public views law enforcement, public safety, and policing. The claim that I'm making is that military-grade equipment has not impacted the public's view of law enforcement, public safety, and policing. The first claim that that the speaker made was that the 1033 program, the main perpetrator, does not fulfill its original purpose of assisting the war on terror. He failed to mention that terror is not the only reason this program was created. This program was also created in efforts to counter drug use. Since 1997, $4.3 billion worth of military equipment has been transferred to the police. He claims that the weapons that were transferred often have no legitimate use and cost tax dollars to maintain. These weapons were purchased with the tax dollars money, so they would go to waste if the police did not use them. True, they were spending more money to maintain these weapons. However, if they choose not to maintain them, they would simply sit as surplus. Weapons are never purchased for this program. Police are simply given surplus. So the amount of money that goes into the weapons purchase is irrelevant because the military purchased these weapons regardless of program. If they're giving them to police, this must mean that either they don't need them or they have a huge surplus. So the police are using the equipment in order to stop terrorism and drug use. For example, four-wheel drive vehicles are used to interrupt drug harvesting, haul away marijuana, patrol streets, and conduct civilians. The program also helps agencies' general equipment needs, such as file cabinets, copiers, fax machines, and things that they are in need of but perhaps are unable to afford. The second claim was that the program grants police access to high-grade military weapons, increasing the risk and possibility of incidents occurring. However, the DLA has a compliance program, and the objective of this program is to make sure that the LXO staff visits each state coordinator and assists them in ensuring that property accountability reports are properly maintained, minimizing potential for fraud, waste, and abuse. The DLA has the final authority to determine the type of equipment, quantity, and location of excessive military property suitable for use in law enforcement activities. There is a clause stating that the new equipment must be used within a year of acquisition, or they must be returned. This clause was created in order to take back the unnecessary equipment. They felt that 1 year was sufficient enough time, and that during this time period, if the equipment was not used, then there is no need for the police to have it. This clause was not created to force the police to use the equipment in order to keep it. The third claim the speaker made was he stated that as a result of new weapons, how communities and police view themselves change. Isaac states that police no longer see themselves as peacekeepers but soldiers. The police grow more aggressive in their duties, becoming increasingly authoritarian. The distrust in the police grows as police actions become increasingly excessive. More crimes are committed, creating a cycle. However, there is no proof for any of these assumptions. He stated no examples or statistics or any authority that provides anything to support his claim. A study from the University of Michigan in 2003, the Monitoring Future study shows that the use of inhalants, hallucinogens, cocaine, and heroin have all decreased since 1997 when the program was created. The militarization of the police does not cause the public to have a negative view, but it, according to the last statistic, is positive. Thank you.
All right, Stevie, you introduce a counterclaim right away, suggesting that there is, in fact, a practical use for these things. I think you're going to need to develop that argument a little bit more effectively. The main argument that you use is that it's designed not just for anti-terrorism, but for the drug trade as well. And you have a little bit of information that applies to this. For instance, the utility of the vehicles in the process of fighting against drug trafficking. So it's a little general, a little bit ambiguous when you're expressing that, but there is some application there. I'm not exactly sure that those are the things that the advocate was focused on in their argument, but it does fall into that category, so I think it's reasonable for you to make an application there. It would be helpful if you had some more particulars about the things that the advocate did focus on, in particular the weapons. On the second point, there's this whole issue that you get involved with compliance with the law, and there's data that you present that talks about fraud. And I'm just trying to figure out, how is any of that relevant to the advocate's claim? It's an interesting point, but it doesn't really seem to suggest that it has a big part in figuring out how these things are being utilized. The one thing that I think that you say here that applies is that they're merely trying to make sure that stuff that is not being utilized gets distributed appropriately. That's why they take it back, and that does not necessarily mean that people are forced to use it. It makes it sound like we're giving you a gun. If you don't use it, you're not doing anything right. We're taking it back away from you, and I don't think that that's... I think you've raised a legitimate point on that, and I think that that's a pretty good response there. It would be nice if there was, for example, do police departments ever worry about having to give that stuff back? Do they do so on a regular basis and say, hey, we don't need this, and they give it back? If you had a couple of examples of that, I think that would undermine the argument that the advocate was presenting even more effectively. You spend a lot of time kind of summarizing the advocate's individual points sometimes, and I think that you need to kind of build up some of your counterclaims and develop some evidence. You challenge a lack of proof on that third point, and I think that that's probably important because that's the key issue in the argument, is the advocate saying that this is having supplying these weapons is having a negative effect on the relationship between the police and community. And then the question comes up, well, what is the proof on this? And they didn't cite any examples, didn't have any data on this. Your proof on this goes back to the argument about this material being applied to the drug trade, and you're making an awfully generous correlation between decrease in certain kinds of drug activity from 2003, since this law went into effect. Being able to connect that to this equipment, I think that's a big stretch that you're trying to make. On the other hand, you can say, at least we think that's the case, but at least there's some evidence that suggests this. What does the advocate provide? Zero evidence. So even if you've got information that's only making a correlation, at least you can say, at least we can see some correlation. The advocate doesn't give us anything, and I think maybe giving a contrast like that would make your argument a little bit more forgivable in this context. All right, thank you.